Any independent campaign that you are planning on joining, much like possibly Aaron Rodgers?
That will be amazing if Aaron Rodgers ends up the vice president, because there's all sorts of potential conflicts relating to time on television, which I haven't heard anybody even really analyze yet. But, there's the fairness doctrine, which basically requires that you give equal opportunity for other candidates. So it would actually throw for CBS and Fox everything into an uproar if somehow he was a nominee for vice president and continued to play for the New York Jets. I think it's unlikely that he's going to walk away from the NFL and decide to just run for vice president. So I think he'd probably run while playing. And that's just even crazier to think about. So, no, I'm fascinated to see how this will play out. If he in fact is the nominee. I still think I'm skeptical that it would be him. But for sheer entertainment, I think that would be amazing. 94% of people in the most recent poll that I put up would prefer him over Kamala Harris in my audience and on my Twitter feed.
Shocking.
And having met a lot of politicians, I think Aaron Rodgers is way smarter than the average member of Congress, quite frankly.
Clay, think of the fairness doctrine, just thinking out loud here. Would like Monday Night Football, for instance, does that count if they show him or interview him? All the national games that every network would want the Jets to be on. That's fascinating from that angle.
Yeah, in theory, what the fairness doctrine would require, and I don't know if anybody's written on this yet, but there are precedents on it. Now, I don't know if there's some sort of exception in sports. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but given the fact that he's the quarterback, he would be on air in a 3-hour football game, and I'm just spitballing here, probably 30 minutes. Like, that doesn't seem crazy to me, right? A 3-hour football game, you'd have, let's say an hour and a half of actual, on-air time of the game. The quarterback would almost always be on the screen during that time. And in theory, somebody could sit there with a stopwatch and make a decision. Now, this happened years ago. People may remember Fred Thompson was an actor who also ended up on the Senate, elected from the state of Tennessee. And he was in movies like The Hunt for Red October. And those movies aired, and they timed how much time he spent on the screen, not even as himself, but as a character, and made an argument that the fairness doctrine, the equal time doctrine, required that national broadcasters and or broadcasters in general provide him with equal amounts of time. Again, I'm not an expert in the fairness doctrine, but I think it only applies for over-the-air broadcast. I don't think it would apply the same way to cable. But, given the fact that CBS, Fox, and ABC, I believe, would all be showing games, NBC as well, for Sunday Night Football, in theory, that would play in potentially for every one of those networks. And they might have to give an equal amount of time to Donald Trump or Joe Biden or their campaigns. Also, maybe it would go to the VP. I mean, again, it's a fascinating legal question. And I think it would have everybody kind of panicked because there's not a precedent that I can think of.
It's a fascinating timing question, too. And, Clay, you'll remember this. When we were kids, Deion Sanders played a football game for the Atlanta Falcons and flew to Pittsburgh, I think it was. Or maybe it was, I think it was actually in the World Series. Flew somewhere and played in the World Series that night for the Atlanta Braves. And they made a 30 for 30 about it, a documentary. Here we have the possibility of Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback for the New York Jets, and then on Wednesday, September 25th, going an hour up the road to Lafayette College to be in the vice president debate that night. From a timing perspective, how much work is actually involved to run as vice president, run on someone's ticket, and is this feasible to do both that we're discussing right now?
I mean, you could make anything happen if you wanted to, right? Now, there's only one day off a week usually for the NFL. So Aaron Rodgers, I mean, look, the Joe Biden presidential campaign in 2020, because of COVID, he basically didn't leave his basement. So you can do a lot of television interviews if you set up a home studio in your house in prime time in the evenings without having to travel a lot. There's also the possibility, I don't know that he would do this. I mean, RFK Jr. is highly unlikely to win. There's also the possibility that Aaron Rodgers could say, hey, I'm going to take 2 months off of the season to campaign, and then I'll be back November 5th and play all of November and December. There's no precedent because it's so kind of wonky and crazy. But I think he could do a lot of campaigning from television, from a television studio, which theoretically he could have built at whatever home he's got in the New York City area. And then I would think he could hop a plane flight and hit a lot of places on the East Coast in the evening. But I would think that wouldn't make the New York Jets very happy. Certainly he could campaign on Tuesdays. He could leave Monday night when they finish treatments or whatever, and be gone all day Tuesday, kind of barnstorming, and get back late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. It's crazy. And again, it's unlikely that RFK Jr. would win. So I'm not sure exactly how all of it would shake out, but it would be a story the likes of which we've truly never seen.
So take the Clay Travis opinionist hat off and put Clay Travis business owner hat on here. You're Woody Johnson. You served as ambassador to the UK for Donald Trump. You've already endorsed Donald Trump. You're the owner of the New York Jets, and your star quarterback comes to you and says, I want to take 2 months off of the season to run as Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s running mate as vice president. How would you respond as a business owner to your biggest investment coming to you and saying, this is what I would like to do. Please allow me to do it?
Well, in theory, and again, I don't know that there's precedence for this. In theory, I believe if Aaron Rodgers made a voluntary decision to take off half the season, and again, I don't think he would do this. I think that the Jets would be entitled to a return of half of his salary. So you guys can look up on the salary cap structure online right now. I think Aaron Rodgers is set to cost like $50 million for the Jets in 2024. So we're talking about a major dollar figure. Would he walk away from $25 million? I don't think that he would. So what rules are there? And I don't know in an individual player contract about being involved in a second job, which is what he would be doing, right? I mean, he's running for vice president of the United States. And how would you analyze his ability to do that? And without knowing exactly what the contract says,
I've got it here.
It's not uncommon, by the way, for guys to, do endorsement deals during the course of the season, film commercials, those things. What have you got?
Yeah, so this year, the structure of the contract is all in Rodgers' favor because he has a signing bonus, a roster bonus of $35 million that's fully guaranteed. His base salary is extremely low. He has a cap hit that's very low if he's on the roster. If they were to release him or do anything like that, a dead cap hit of $66 million would hit the Jets. Like it's and the vast majority of his contract is all to him anyway, yearly, annually. So he's got them. And, I mean, he's basically the offensive coordinator, head coach, if he wants to be.
So, look, if I'm Woody Johnson, I certainly don't I certainly don't want any of my players running for vice president of the United States during the season, regardless of whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents. I'm sure Fox wouldn't want me to decide to run for vice president either when they've got me under contract. Like, I think that would be a standard position of most employers, regardless of the politics or the job. If you're paying somebody to do a job, you don't want them to suddenly leave. And by the way, it wouldn't be just Fox. Like iHeart, which has me under contract, doesn't want me to leave and not do my radio show, right? And it would run into some of the same equal fairness doctrine issues if I were appearing on radio while running for all this. By the way, my 13-year-old just came out. They love free agency and said Mason Rudolph is signed with the Titans. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I haven't seen that.
Backup.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's Lincoln Travis reporting that.
Thank you, Lincoln.
Huge report from Lincoln Travis. I love it.
If he's gotten taken by some fake Twitter account, I'm not saying that it's true. My 13-year-old, I'm on the balcony in Florida here, just opened the door and told me that while I'm talking to you. So you can have somebody on your crew do research and see whether Lincoln Travis has been fooled by some spam Twitter account.
It's accurate. It's accurate.
Okay. So that's an interesting move, obviously, because Mason Rudolph had, I would say, sort of a checkered career with the Pittsburgh Steelers, most memorable for getting hit in the head with the helmet.
Yeah.
But there's been talk, given the fact that Ryan Tannehill is no longer there, of the necessity of a backup quarterback for Will Levis. So that's at least one quarterback off the board. But back to your question on Woody Johnson, I would be anti. I would be anti my quarterback doing it. I would probably go to the NFL Players Association and ask about standard player contracts, what sort of situation is covered by something of this magnitude or nature. Guys, I can't think of a currently under contract player that has ever run for political office of any scope or magnitude, right? Whether it's governor, Congress, frankly, school board, much less president of the United States or vice president of the United States.
Which campaign does this hurt the most, votes-wise, if he were to run as the running mate with Kennedy?
Yeah, there's an uncertainty on that. There's tons of polling out there. My general inclination is that the Trump people are hurt more by RFK Jr. than Biden is, because there are more Republicans interested in voting for RFK Jr. than there are Democrats. I think that you could find somebody who would argue the opposite to that. That's my general opinion, and reflected in some of the data that I have seen. I don't think that Aaron Rodgers as the vice president necessarily moves the needle that much one way or the other for RFK Jr. In fact, I would think that it would hurt him a little bit because while I think Aaron Rodgers is smart, I think if you're trying to argue, hey, I'm the adult in the room, I'm way more reliable than Joe Biden or Donald Trump are, picking an NFL quarterback as your running mate doesn't make me think, hey, you're more serious. Now, it's in terms of attention, this is certainly, it's hard to top the amount of attention that this would get. So if your primary thought is, as RFK Jr., hey, there's tons of people out there who might be willing to vote for me. They have no idea I'm running for president of the United States. What's the thing I could do to sort of cannonball into the American political pool? This would be the kind of thing that would do that. So I don't know what the polling would reflect, but my general belief is RFK Jr. hurts Trump more than Biden, and so Aaron Rodgers would hurt Trump more than Biden. And one more little caveat there would be, if you're arguing the other side, the argument would be Trump supporters are far more committed. That is, if you're a Trump person, you really like Trump. Whereas, does Biden have any actual fan base, or is it just an anti-Trump fan base?
Yeah.
Right. I think that would be the argument if you're trying to make. So if you're not as committed to your candidate, maybe you're more likely to go for a third party. That would be the argument. And most of the polling that I see, when third parties are included, remember that would include Cornel West, that would include the Libertarian candidate, Jill Stein. Third party tends to help Trump have a little bit bigger margin than he had otherwise.
Yeah, Biden definitely feels like kind of a default candidate because you hate another candidate more than a huge fan base. Clay,
it's like being a sports fan. If you're watching a game and you're rooting against the team as opposed to rooting for a team,
right? Yeah.
I think most Biden people are just anti-Trump people. They're not really pro-Biden people, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So Clay, Lincoln Travis, good job with the report. He nailed it with Mason Rudolph. Our Armando Salguero at OutKick.com saying that the Titans are actually going to pay more for Mason Rudolph than the Steelers paid for Russell Wilson to be their starter. So an interesting move there, $3.6 million. So the deal is worth up to that, so possibly paying more. Derrick Henry leaves for the Ravens. The Titans signed Tony Pollard for the exact same amount of money that Derrick Henry's getting in Baltimore. I feel like if players leave, especially legends of an organization, they leave because their stated goal is to win a title, and they don't feel like they're going to do it in one spot. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement for the Titans organization. Am I way off on this, especially considering the money was the same that the Titans just paid for Tony Pollard?
No, I would do what Derrick Henry did. I mean, I think if your hometown team pays you more, then you might be willing to stay in this scenario. But if you're 30 years old and you're Derrick Henry and you feel like you only have a couple of years left and you've been to the AFC Championship game, but you've never gone to a Super Bowl, and you have an opportunity to go play for a team that'll be one of the 4 or 5 favorites to win a Super Bowl next year, and you can do RPO with Lamar Jackson, or you can stay with a second-year quarterback in Will Levis that nobody has any idea about, with a completely remade offensive line that may or may not end up being very decent. To me, you would have to pay me more in order for me to be willing to stay in Nashville, as opposed to equal money. I think the Ravens offer, given that he's now playing for legacy, he's a Hall of Famer, Derrick Henry, and he probably wants to go to a Super Bowl and win one, and sees that opportunity with the Baltimore Ravens at a much higher level. So that choice seems very rational. Now, if the Titans were offering, $4 or $5 million more, or frankly, if any team that is not the same caliber as the Baltimore Ravens, then it becomes a more difficult challenge, because you have to analyze, okay, how much is the money worth to be able to compete for a championship? That's a more challenging option. But if two teams are offering me around the same dollar figure, and one has a chance to win a Super Bowl and the other one does not, I would take the team that has a chance to win a Super Bowl. I don't think that's a tough call.